Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you again this morning.
Yeah, midweek.
Yep,
Here we go again.
yep. This is our
And
midweek
we're going to finish this is the second part.
It is part two of
Mhm.
the podcast where we're focusing on men and
Mhm.
things that men learn too late. In the last podcast, we kind of set the stage of the topic. Talking about some of the challenges that, are not necessarily unique to men, but are certainly much more often seen in men. And
Right.
that's this, they tend to struggle for different reasons. You know, we recognize that we still live in a male dominant world. We live in a world that, at least in the United States, men tend to be in the higher positions. Some of that is changing.
Mhm.
Fortunately, some of that is changing,
Right.
but it's still predominantly, men who rise to those positions, and so it creates this expectation. And the reality is that a lot of men will not reach those highest points. And so it leads to a lot of discomfort and a lot of frustration. And we're going to talk about, finish talking about this list of things that men tend to learn a little bit too late, and that we should be doing a little bit better job of teaching men as they're growing up.
Right. Yeah. And we have a website in the show notes, and the
Mhm.
title is Things Men Learn Too Late, Lessons that Men Learn Too Late in Life. And we think it's true. I mean, if you do couples therapy, if you do marriage counseling, you see this the truncated, limited emotional life that most men have. Much of what he talks about is about our social emotional development, or our stunted, I guess is a better way to put it, our stunted social emotional development that men experience. And part of the problem, I think, I think we're still giving boys and men's these various stereotypic messages of boys don't cry and you don't express your, and you never admit weakness. And if somebody breaks up with you, the best response is to be angry or to hurt them in some way. No, that's not how, but that's the message we're giving our boys. At least boys are giving that message to each other.
Right.
Uh, and so I think many of the 10 issues that he raises are address our social emotional development, how we understand our own emotions and how we express those emotions.
Yeah.
And in the previous podcast, we talked the first four. We went through the first four about competition and self-care and understanding your emotions and expressing them accurately. And we're going to present the remainder in this second podcast.
Yeah. And it's critical again, because these are perspectives, these are ideas that are so important for, you said social emotional development. It is so important for our relationships. I mean, say what you want about a man who is familiar with his emotions and, is connected to his emotions and can communicate about his emotions, but that person is able to work with a partner, for example, their spouse or their whoever they're in a relationship with. That person is going to communicate and work with their partner in a very different way than a person who doesn't understand those things, that who doesn't get their emotions, who responds, as you said, to everything with anger and frustration. So it's so important that men think about these things and that we do a better job when they're still in those early learning phases of childhood, that we start teaching boys some of this. And the next one that we're going to talk about, and this is a stereotype that I think has so much foundation in truth that I mean, it may not even we may not even consider it a stereotype anymore. This is just the way that it is, that it's okay to ask for help.
Right.
So many that trope is that, you're driving around for 3 hours lost because the guy driving refuses to ask anyone for directions.
Right.
Um, but men do a very poor job of seeking help.
Right.
They just think that they can do it themselves. And again, I can think back to as a kid to all the lessons that I was told that support that. If you're hurt, just get up and walk it off. Don't ask anybody for help. Don't ask anybody for anything. You just fix it yourself. And I think that it gives this impression that you should be able to take care of everything in your life. And if you can't, then there's a default or there's a problem with you.
Right.
Um, and you know, not being able to do everything yourself is not the equivalent of independence.
Right. Exactly.
You have to be able to ask for help because other people are going to know more things than you do about some things.
Right. Yeah, it's okay to be vulnerable. I mean, it's okay to say, "Can you help me do this?" I asked you the other day, what is that QR code?
Yeah.
Remember the QR code thing, right? I don't have any pride. I said, "What?" I just wanted to, and I don't mind being vulnerable. How many kids say, "Well, I had a question, but I didn't want to ask it in
Right.
class because I would have been embarrassed." I mean, we've all experienced that, right?
Right.
And so it's okay to be vulnerable. It is really okay to be vulnerable. We all have those times. Also, it actually is a sign of strength. It's a positive attribute to know when to ask for help. I mean, you
Well,
can avoid a lot of problems.
it certainly suggests that you have enough insight to recognize, what, I'm
Mhm.
not very good at this. Let me ask somebody who's better.
Right,
Certainly a
right,
level of self-awareness that we really want people to have.
right, right. So don't be afraid to ask for help. It's okay. All right. We all do. We all need it. So just don't be afraid to ask for help. All
Right.
right.
And
That's a
you do
good
have
thing.
to balance that with, now there are some things you can do yourself.
Right,
Like
right.
I talked on a couple podcasts ago about the situation at my house where you know
Mhm.
questions are asked by our teens and
Right,
it's like that you have a computer in your hand as you're asking me that question,
right.
a computer in your hand that you can
It's
type
loaded with Google.
and just ask the question,
Right, right,
how long does it take to get to Tampa?
right.
You don't have to ask, I don't have to help you with everything, but when you need help, you ask for help.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And then when you do fail, and I hope you fail,
Hmm.
because failure is not the end.
Right.
Okay, we have to stop seeing failure as something bad. I hate what schools have done with grades.
Right.
We're afraid to give an F, we're afraid to give a D, we're afraid to give a C. You have to know how you're doing, and that's one of the ways we communicate. Failure is not the end of the process. Failure is not a fatal flaw that we should avoid.
Right.
Uh, if fear of failure limits us, if we're afraid, we used to teach this in teacher preparation classes that students are either failure avoiding or success pursuing. And we want students to be success pursuing, not failure avoiding. And many students are failure avoiding. They just don't want to fail. Okay.
Right.
Failure is part of the journey. If you're constantly growing and you're constantly challenging yourself, there are going to be times when you fall short.
Hmm.
You're going to fail, okay? But failure is not the end. Failure is just time to redirect, reassess, reevaluate, and make some other decisions.
Right. Yeah, I don't I think I confuse parents sometimes when I share with them that I hate and it really is becoming a hate. I hate the idea of straight A's
Me
because
too.
you know there are many there are too many kids making straight A's.
Right,
If everybody in the class is making straight A's, either the material isn't hard enough, it's
right,
not challenging them enough, or it's there's so much of a curve that it's meaningless anyways.
right.
I always follow that statement up with I get it because I get again we're back to competition. I get the competition of getting into colleges and
Mhm.
whatever, but I think that the idea of straight A's is giving kids the wrong message.
Right. Hmm.
And it leads to, you and I have both had this experience when we were, college professors, where then they get to college and they just expect to be able to get straight A's all the time.
Hmm.
And so when they don't, because their work is junk,
Hmm.
and mom and dad aren't there to do the work for them, then they don't know how to handle that. They don't know how
Right.
to handle getting a poor grade on something.
Right.
They don't
Yeah.
know what it's like
When
to not
students,
succeed.
yeah, when students would come to graduate school and say, well, my goal is to get all A's, I would always wince a little bit because I was thinking, I wish your goal was to learn as much as possible. You don't have to worry about, I mean, I understand about grades, but I always would wince a little when somebody say, I'm here to get all A's. But my goal is to get all A's. Well, if you're learning everything in the process, I guess it's okay. But if you're only pursuing an A, I think you're going to start missing things.
Right. When I was going for my license, you were going for your license. When I'm seeing patients, nobody ever asked me what my GPA was.
No, nope.
It never comes up because it doesn't matter. In the old adage of, what do you call the doctor who graduated last in medical school?
Doctor.
Doctor, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
you're just you learn the material, you master the material, and you move on. If you get an A, that's great. If you get a B, that's fine. If you get a C, sometimes that's fine too.
Right. That's right.
But you just the goal has to be learning, and
Mhm.
it is so much. It kind of goes back to that competition thing where it's like, oh no, I have to have an A because I have to have the best score in the
Right.
class.
No, you really don't. Mhm.
It's a false achievement in my
Right.
mind.
Yep. And then the next one is health is wealth. We learned this too late. We prioritize work and money and success and 401ks and all that stuff. We rush and we push and we focus on that. And then you get to a certain age, sometimes it's in your 30s or 40s or 50s, and you get that little tap on the shoulder where you can't do things you used to do, or you don't recover as quickly. And you say, wow, I better start thinking about my health because I want to keep doing this when I'm 60 or 65. And you don't want to start getting healthy when you're 65. You
Right,
have to start that earlier. So again, this is one of those things that we put off and we address it a little too late.
right,
And health is one of those things because you want to make sure that you don't neglect your mental and physical health to the point where you can't reverse it.
right.
That you're going to get some physical problem that you can't reverse after a certain age.
Absolutely. You and I were having this makes me think of the conversation you and I were having the other morning where we were talking about how, a lot of times when we were growing up, our goal was it is a ridiculous goal was to be a millionaire by the time we were,
Right.
85 or whatever.
Right.
Um, you know, some people succeed at that. The vast majority of us do not. But did you ever, I know that I never,
Right.
say, well, when I'm 25, I want to be in the best physical condition of my life.
Right.
When I'm 30, I want to be able to run a marathon. We
Mhm.
didn't, most of us didn't say that when we were teenagers.
Right.
We weren't thinking about our physical health. We weren't thinking about our mental health. We were thinking about money. We were thinking
Right.
about work success and stuff. And
Right.
we do have to shift that and help kids, especially boys. I think this is one of those things where this is also important with girls because you mentioned in the last podcast about how the body image, that's a huge issue with girls.
Mhm.
It is becoming a bigger and bigger issue with boys as well. But it's
Yep.
this idea that no, you need to be healthy,
Mhm.
not aspiring to a particular physique
Right.
or a particular weight, you have to focus on working towards health. And so we need to better teach that idea of health rather than, some other arbitrary goal.
Yeah, because these kids are taking steroids.
Right?
Teenage boys are taking steroids to make their bulk up and make them look like they're 25 instead of 15.
Right.
There are certain things that aren't going to happen until you're in your 20s. So health, yes. The next thing is relationships. And one of the things that men learn too late is that relationships require work.
Yeah.
Finding finding your ideal mate is just the beginning.
Right.
And I think many men have the feeling that um, if you find the right person, that that person will somehow take care of you and the relationship, and everything will work out okay.
Well, yeah, I think that there's that, but I think that what it really the underlying thing is that I think a lot of people feel like when they once they find that right person, it's just always going to be like that. It's just always
It'll be like that for Mhm.
forever. And
Right.
people change, people evolve over time. And
Mhm.
when we're working with couples, I know that we focus on this idea that as we change, couples, you either change together or you change apart.
Exactly.
And to change together requires work. You have to put in the effort. You have to nurture, just like you do a plant. You have to
Mhm.
nurture a relationship through communication and compromise and empathy and just, focusing on meeting each other's needs and being there for each other. You may find the person that's right for you, but my goodness, if you neglect it, that person's not going to be the right one for you anymore.
That's right. If you're not taking care of that relationship, I will absolutely guarantee you that it will die. And it's going to be dead before you know it,
Yeah,
before you even realize it. And you might not be able to resurrect it. It may be
right.
dead beyond resurrection. And so, we did a podcast some time ago about the stages of marriage,
Yeah,
and that the beginning of your relationship is just a stage, and that's going to change.
right,
Every couple of years, you're going to be into another stage of the relationship, and it's going to require, each stage requires effort and requires attention. And you have to have a consistent effort, consistent nurturing to keep the relationship alive. Um, we tend to, when we talk about finding a partner, we want to find the right person for ourselves. But then you also, and I think men forget this, you have to be the right person for him or her. You have to be the right person for your partner. You
right,
also have that obligation, not for your partner just to take care of you in the relationship, but you have to be the right person. You have to work as hard as you can to be the right person for your partner.
right. Yeah, it's always effortful. It always requires work. And, and I think that when you see those healthy couples, when you see those couples who are making it work, they have those hard conversations. They work through those difficult times, but they do it together.
Right.
And it's not always easy.
Right.
And we kind of get this idea for whatever reason. I don't even know. I really don't even understand where it comes from because, you know, many of us, if not most of us, come from broken homes. And so many of us see that, yeah, when they're not working, marriages fall apart.
Yeah,
And
more than half fall apart.
right. And I don't know if it's that we just accept the fact that they fall apart. And so it's just like, well, it's going to happen anyway. So what does it matter or what? But we really have to work on, nurturing it and maintaining it and taking care of it.
Right.
Because, and as we move on to the next point is that life is not a dress rehearsal.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, you can get married, you can get a divorce, you can get married again. Yeah, you can do some of those things, but believe me when I say that a lot of those things that you go through, you're going to look back at it and say, "Man, I really wish I would have done some of this different."
Right.
And
Right.
and so, but you don't get to go back and do it again.
That's right. You don't get an encore.
Right.
I mean, how many times have you heard me say, I wish I could go back and re-raise my children? I
Yeah.
wish I could go back and start all over again. But I'm sorry, you don't get a mulligan, you don't get an encore. And this isn't a dress rehearsal. Life is what is happening right now.
Right.
We talked about mindfulness and living in the present
Right.
in part one. And it applies here as well. It's life is what we're doing right now. And that was a movie, right? Carpe Diem,
Yeah.
is from a movie, um, uh, but seize the day. Make this day as good as you possibly can. That's your obligation.
Absolutely.
Don't put too much off to the future. You know, you've all heard about, well, yeah, now they have the money to go to Europe, but they don't have the hips to go to Europe, or they don't have the knees to go to Europe, or they don't have the stamina to go to Europe. There are plenty of people who would like to travel, but they don't have the health anymore. So don't put too many things off for the future.
Right. And that leads to the last one. And that is, everything really is about time.
Right.
You time passes very quickly. What is that saying? The days are long, but the year is short.
Right.
The idea that, man, you go through these days and they just feel so
Mhm.
heavy and burdensome. But then all of a sudden it's December.
Right.
Here we are. This is the last podcast for April.
Right. Yeah,
So,
we're done. We got a third of the year is 4 months have gone by.
right.
January, February, March, April.
So the time goes by very quickly. And if we're not careful, we let so much time pass that we miss opportunities. Every moment counts. And again, we don't really talk to kids about this enough
Mhm.
because you know, I you said a moment ago, how many times have you said, I wish I could go back and raise my kids again?
Right.
One of the things I wish I could go back to and reorient is the idea of um, I just keep waiting for that next thing. And like when you're in school, I can't wait till summer. Okay, well, if you're saying that now, what you're doing is you're wishing these next 2 months just go away.
Right.
We're
Right.
just wishing time away. I wish it was already Christmas. I wish it was already my birthday. We're wishing time away and we're not taking advantage and using every day for what it
Right.
can be. And I
Right.
think this leads to loads of other problems because that's why people feel stuck. People don't do the things that they could do to improve their life or make better decisions because they're not using their time the way that they could. But my goodness, make it count.
Right. Exactly. Derive joy in this moment. I find myself thinking, oh man, is it the weekend yet? I can't wait until Friday night, or I can't wait until Saturday night. I think, wait a minute. This is my life today.
Right.
This is a precious moment. And I have to get the most that I can. I have to make it as good as I possibly can,
Yeah.
making this day good.
Yeah, I was talking to a patient yesterday. It was a couples session, and I was sharing with them, one of the strategies I try to use when I'm at home and I'm feeling frustrated and just overwhelmed. It was a rough day or whatever, and things were happening at home. That's frustrating. And I talk to them about how like I'll remove myself from the room and go to the bathroom or whatever, and think about, okay,
Mhm.
what am I doing? I'm frustrated. I'm behaving in a way that I don't want to be.
Right.
This is not the type of person I want to be. This is not this type of husband or father or partner or anything. This is not who I want to be. And I'm sitting here thinking, I wish that I could just go to bed. I'm wishing that this day would just go away and then we could go to the next day. And you pause and you think, okay, is this who I really want to be? Because I'm not taking advantage of some of the time that I could use. This is
Mhm.
a time that I could connect, that I could help, that I could listen. I could just be present for something
Mhm.
right now
Mhm.
and be available.
Right.
And if we take that time, again, I wish it was something that I'd learned a long time ago, but if we just take the time to be present and available, life can be so much more precious and
Right.
and valuable and peaceful.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. Learn how to live in this day. Learn how to live in this moment. Stop going to the future. Stop ruminating about the past, and fantasizing about the future. Live this day well. Okay. So our 2 cents, our final thoughts as we move out of this podcast. One is prioritize your health.
right.
You can't get it back, and you're only going to deteriorate. After 30, it starts to go downhill. So do what you can do to take care of your health. Embrace your emotions,
Which is so
understand them, and
big,
express them.
so important.
Take care of your relationships. They have to be nurtured. If you don't nurture your relationships, they're going to die. and you may not be able to resurrect. You may separate. You may separate from each other to such an extent that you can't put it back together. So value your relationships and nurture them so that they remain healthy.
Right. And learn from your failures.
Yeah.
We talk, that's a topic that we focus on here on the podcast so often that, man, you really need to experience failure and
Right.
make sure that you recognize that you can recover from it.
That's
Uh,
right. Mhm.
Get back up, go try again. It's
Mhm.
all right. You're not a failure. You just failed at that attempt. So now
You
you can,
don't fail until you stop,
right,
until you stop trying. That's the only way you can fail. If you keep moving, it's not a failure.
right. Absolutely. And then finally, just live every day. I'm not going to say live every day like it's your last, because I think that that's more
A
cliche
bit
than it needs to
maudlin.
be. But live every day as fully and as passionately and as comprehensively as you can. Take advantage of every moment that you have.
Right.
And meaning, if you have that opportunity to sit down and talk to a friend, sit down and talk to a friend. If you have that opportunity to connect with your partner, connect with your partner. And most importantly, if you have a moment to an opportunity to teach your kids, teach your sons some of these things, teach them some of these things.
Right.
Take the time to do it directly, talk about it openly and
Mhm.
make it a opportunity for them to grow, as well as for you to grow.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah,
Yep. And don't wait. Don't put it off any longer. Start today. The best time to have started, the best time to start was yesterday,
right.
but now it's today. You can
Right.
start today.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What was that saying? The best time to plant a tree was 2 years ago.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
all right. Well, with that,
Okay.
that's it for today. Again, as you mentioned, the link to the article that talks about a lot of this stuff is in the show notes. So check that out. But otherwise, we will be back next week to who knows what we'll talk about. All kinds of things to talk about going on.
There's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So until
All right.
then, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.